Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stand Against Racism. I am Andrea from YWCA Greater Green Bay. I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor for this season, Humana, and to really thank them for joining us in our mission to eliminate racism and empower women. Today, we are jumping right in a conversation with the Green Bay Police Department about the use of force by law enforcement officers. We have had a lot of questions and a lot of conversation around this topic, especially recently. This is certainly not a new topic, but has gotten a lot of renewed interest since the murder of George Floyd. So we wanted to be able to have some conversation and add some context about what the Green Bay Police Department is doing and what kinds of policies and procedures they have in place around the use of force. So I hope that this is helpful to you and that you learned something. And I want to invite you to join us in the Stand Against Racism group on Facebook for some continued conversation with us as well. So without further ado, thank you all for being here, and we're going to pop into the webinar. Hi, Lieutenant Ramos. Can you give us an introduction? Who are you?
Hi, well, I'm Chad Ramos. I am a lieutenant at the City of Green Bay Police Department. I'm currently assigned to our training division as a full-time trainer. And what that entails is that I'm responsible for all the training for new officers as well as veteran officers as well, and to oversee that program. I've been an officer for 26 years. I had 7 years serving in the city of Sheboygan, where I'm from, came here in March 2003, and have been here ever since. Worn a variety of hats in this profession. I've been privileged to do a lot of different things, serving on a lot of different teams and teaching many of the unified tactics of law enforcement for a lot of years. And so while I may have a lot of titles and things of that nature experience, you're always learning. And even after 26 years, make no mistake, you're learning new ways to do some old things as well. And so this is me, and this is where I'm at.
I appreciate you so much for joining us today. This is really something that I've been looking forward to. I really appreciate you joining us for this. So today we're here to talk a little bit about use of force. Our audience has certainly had a lot of questions around use of force by police departments and by police officers since George Floyd and then other instances that have happened since then. And then I also noticed that you happen to have an updated use of force policy for the Green Bay Police Department that just got published less than a month ago now. So it sort of piqued my interest that came across. It's like, oh, it's a good time to start talking about it. So can you tell us a little bit, what is that even? So I'm saying use of force repeatedly here. What does that mean?
Right. So for the city of Green Bay, for an incident to qualify as a use of force incident, an officer, in order to control somebody, had to be at the level of decentralization or greater. Decentralization meaning they took you to the ground. So when presence and dialogue didn't work and they had to initiate some sort of physical contact with you, we quantify them at the point where officers take somebody to the ground, and anything above that. So even if they just grabbed your arm, you gave a little resistant tension, but I was able to overpower you, not a use of force incident. But the moment I start taking you to the ground and any other use of force above that, that qualifies for something we call a use of force incident.
Okay. And when are officers allowed to use force? What's some of the guidelines there?
Yeah, and so legally, without a doubt, it's arresting people, it's detaining people, it's defending myself or other people, it's maintaining control of resistant people, or even preventing escape, right? So those are the legal categories, if you will, where an officer is privileged, where their conduct normally could be considered criminal. It's acceptable under those standards in those situations when an officer is presented with that. So those are the primary times when officers can use force.
Okay. So you mentioned that these are actions that would sort of maybe normally be criminal if a random person on the street did this, but police officers are allowed to do this in certain instances. When or how, kind of what training is there on deciding what is a reasonable use of force, and when is this a place where it's a privileged activity that police officers can use?
Can I answer that with just a lot of training? With advice?
A lot,
Yeah,
all the time,
it's
ongoing.
all the time. It's ongoing. It's never ending. It's evolving. And our responsibility in training, right, is we try to give the most realistic training to somebody that we can without obviously being in the field. And good training is going to mimic the field, but again, there are some things that are choreographed. Nothing replaces the real world. Make no mistake, right? But it is our responsibility to give good quality training and put officers in scenarios and give them foundational training methodologies, if you will, that'll put them in a position to best represent the men and women we want when you are serving in uniform. So now every officer in the state of Wisconsin has to go through a basic recruit academy, and within that academy will be use of force concepts, learning how to control people under certain situations. That doesn't change once you become a police officer and come to the City of Green Bay Police Department. We are annually looking at ways to reinforce the concepts, the skill sets that are necessary for officers to have an understanding of when it's appropriate to apply force, right? So I can teach you all the skills in the world and all that, but to understanding how to balance the behavior you see in front of you along with what would be objectively reasonable force, that can take some time, right? And experience, good quality training to help you find what would be considered maybe a sweet spot. But every situation is different. And every time an officer engages somebody where they have to use force to control somebody, like I had mentioned on the front end, those 5 different times, we have to look at it as, was that objectively reasonable? Was it reasonable in the moment for an officer to do that? And that's the tricky part, right? What oftentimes happens is we become focused on the end and we don't see the incident from the beginning, middle, and end. And oftentimes that's problematic for reviewing use of force. And I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but there is a lot of training that goes in on the front end. We're constantly reinforcing the concepts and understanding the legal basis for using force. And then when we evaluate it, we have to truly look at it from a beginning, middle, and end standpoint.
Do you ever go through instances where there wasn't a report, everything is great, but just sit down as a team and go through and say, like, what's the decision made here? What are we making here? How is this kind of working to this point? And how does this make sense? Do you review that with others on the team?
Yeah, so we have a full cadre of a training unit here at the Green Bay Police Department, and we engage in those conversations. And when we put together our in-service training at what we think will be the most realistic scenarios and trainings to best replicate what's in the public, we try to, collaborate and say, hey, these are the type of incidents that happen when officers find themselves where they may have to use some sort of force, if you will, to control people. What are those likely situations? What are some things we've seen reoccurring? Where have we seen that we could do better? And so, there's always only so many different ways that people will even assault law enforcement officers, and we try to be very good in that. But that doesn't mean it's every situation. Every situation is so unique and different, but there are a lot of common traits to situations where officers find themselves having to use force. And we want to make sure we're mindful and be very good at that and say, look, when you see these behaviors, they may be indicative of assaultive behavior, or they may be indications that something might go awry here. Be aware of that. And then when these things do happen, are you able to control that with presence and dialogue? Because first and foremost, that's what every officer is expected to do. Right? You're trained to say, listen, I understand the effectiveness of this situation can be heavily dependent on my ability to communicate appropriately in any given situation, right? Short of somebody being maybe a long-term, short-term EDP, or even some sort of chemical-induced EDP, we feel strongly that our ability to communicate with people is our best weapon, if you will, and most effective tool. And when officers incorporate good communication skills in order to gain compliance and they understand the reasoning behind it, they're very effective.
I Can you tell us what an EDP is?
Yeah, like an emotionally disturbed person. Sorry, law enforcement is full of acronyms and abbreviations, and so yeah, like somebody who's emotionally disturbed, right? And that's gotten the attention of the public a lot, particularly with some of the news stories you've seen over the years, and even we can go back to Ferguson, right? That where officers need to be better at de-escalating situations, for instance, right? Let's talk about it. It's a big buzzword, right?
Mhm.
Without a doubt, this has been a part of our communication training for years. But I'll go you a couple steps further with that. First and foremost, I want our men and women to incorporate and come from a position of non-escalation first. So before even anything is ever said, where are you as an individual, right? Internally, are you focused on serving other people, and that when you have contacts, whether they're stressful or not, okay, is your delivery of your communication, is it done in a way that doesn't escalate things, right? That it's non-escalating in nature itself. I think that's really important, right? So we can train behaviors for officers, skill sets, but we think it's so important to build the internal part of the men and women that serve, that they are people of character, they understand the value of good communication, and that they're oriented on serving people. And we take pride in that. And when they do that, we believe that their ability to communicate is so much more effective because they're genuine and they understand the value of that. So we build from the inside of who you are, not just the behaviors, not just de-escalation skills. We sometimes we can't avoid that, but maybe did we contribute to that? So before we get there, let's make sure we're men and women who value all human life and do it from a position where I'm not going to be escalating in nature. I'm going to be a calm, stable presence with the ability to effectively communicate, and we'll see where things go. And I'll manage them with my presence and dialogue, and maybe some physical alternatives if need be, because it rose to that.
Yeah, that sort of emotional regulation piece I think is so important. I'm really glad that you touched on that. That was so Sandra Bland, who was a woman in Texas who got pulled over when the body cam footage came out from that one. I was so very disappointed in the way that the officer, from my perspective, watching the body cam footage, or maybe it was even just audio, it seemed very much like the officer was like pushing it forward the whole time. So being able to recognize that that's a thing that we want to work with officers on, that we're and that officers are not escalating situations, and that we're coming from that place of emotional regulation of like, I need to be the big kid in this situation and keep my stuff under control, and then work with whatever I've got going on as well. But adding to it certainly isn't going to help.
Yeah,
But
and Andrea, be mindful. I mean, this is challenging because you don't call police because your life is in order, right? Or we don't interact. It's typically because some sort of situation went left or right of what would be ideal. And so you call police to help with whatever disturbance, disorder you have. And oftentimes we're seeing people's behavior at their worst. So over the 25, 30-year career, which we want somebody to serve in, if you don't regulate yourself internally and keep yourself positioned on a strong foundation of who you are as a human being and character, it's easy to fall in. Now, again, I don't want to over comment on what this situation is, but I'm just in general in my feeling that if we don't recognize that as a law enforcement agency, that I'm a person, I'm a human being in this uniform. And how am I best going to train the men and women to survive and have a successful 25, 30-year career? I got to look at them internally. I've got to look at how they see themselves. Do they think and feel a certain way? Is it positive? And are they trying to be people of positive influence? Or are they just letting that go uncontrolled? And when that happens that way, we can't expect men and women in uniform to be at their best if we don't truly engage in that. And everything else, I'm just confident, is disingenuous. It's robotic. It's not effective, and it isn't going to be absolute. Make no mistake, Andrea. We'll try to help everyone, and we want to do that. People will still choose to do things to us and are going to react a certain way. I can be the nicest officer in the world, most humble, polite, competent, confident. You can trust me. I'm disciplined. I got great communication skills. At the end of the day, somebody still may make a choice not to comply with what I'm saying through presence and dialogue. And if our men and women are squared at their core, I believe strongly then that when they have to use force, they're going to do it from a position of being in control, effective, and righteous, period, because they really value you at all costs.
So you've talked a lot about kind of building teams and making sure that people are accountable for their stuff, that our teams, our officers are humans, and humans have to be accountable for their stuff. And also, like, I mean, we all like appreciate that. We need to have some structure in our lives. So in the the use of force policy, there's a duty to intercede and a duty to report. Can you tell us what those things are?
Yeah, sure. So last year, this started to get even more attention. And in the state of Wisconsin, we've always had what we call an officer override concept, if you will, that where if forever you're in a situation where you see your partner not acting at their best, it's incumbent on you to step in and do the right thing, right? Without a doubt. But it got some more attention with some of the events that have happened over the last few years. And in March of 2021, all officers of the City of Green Bay Police Department went through a duty to intervene training where we looked at the responsibility of all of us, no matter how many days, years, months that you've had on the job, rank, or what have you, that I have a responsibility to you and you have one to me, and that we're going to do this for each other, not because of rank, but because oftentimes we come through very critical emotional situations. And if at times that I get amped up and very stressed out and having a challenge dealing with what's in front of me, if you, partner officer, don't step in and help me, I may not be at my best. Because of my human qualities, we do have stressors. We do have times where it impacts us. Now, that isn't some sort of blanket excuse. I'm not looking for any of that. But we have to be men and women of character and willing to stand up for each other and do the right thing, because in some of these critical, stressful incidents, we have a lot of physiological changes, and the stress, and your body's smarter than you think you are. And so it's blood and the attention is going to do something, and we can find ourselves in survival moments where it's very critical. And sometimes that means others stepping in and helping us. And through good quality training, I think we start to reduce and mitigate how we handle stress. But make no mistake, there still are moments where if you see me not being at my best, I have already given you permission to step in, and it's your duty to intervene and intercede on my behalf. We've given each other that acceptance and okay to do it. And so it got some more attention for us as well.
So I know you want to talk about how things are investigated. So if there is use of force, or if there's any allegations of improper use of force, how that's investigated. Do you want to walk us through that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So when an incident happens, when it qualifies as a use of force incident, like I had mentioned earlier, we have to look at it from the beginning, middle, and end. I can't just dive right into the meat and potatoes, right? So what happens on the 5 o'clock news, somebody's going to see a snippet of a video or an audio like you had talked about. When we review it, we can't. We got to step all the way back to the start of that incident. And so for me, when it comes to reviewing a use of force incident, what was the nature of the call? Did we initiate that contact? What was the information the officer knew? And I start to build an understanding to try to see it through the lens of that officer as it played itself out, as opposed to just looking at the end, which sometimes we can have an end or a conclusion bias, where if we only see this part of it, now it's difficult to look at that story from where the officer did. I want to see it through every step they did to get an understanding and appreciation for what they dealt with, and just make a decision after reading their reports, listening to what the witnesses said, okay? And then looking at body camera, without a doubt, one of the greatest tools. I've said, actually, I'm not happy that we got one camera, I want 7. Okay, give them to me all day long, because they are a great tool, but they can't be the only thing, right? Because it only captures one thing through that lens. Even if that camera's right here and my head turns, my camera's still pointed here, I see over there, right? So there are some limitations, but make no mistake, they are our friend. And so our process really goes into diving into all the steps that that officer endured at that time, and look at it from the standpoint of, was this objectively reasonable? When I look at the totality of the whole offense, the situation, can we rewrite this and have an understanding that that was acceptable? That's a challenge for some people, because the men and women that I work with, we're not Chuck Liddell. We're not Mike Tyson. I'm not some prized fighter. And oftentimes people have this feeling that when you're in law enforcement, that you are this expert fighter, right? There's certainly many people that have advanced standing training. Many of us here are great, able to control and do things physically, but not everybody is. And the courts have recognized that when officers are dealt with tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving situation, we have to be mindful of their humanity and not look at it through 2020. What was their training? What was their experience? What was the underlying offense? And do we think this is objectively reasonable? Not always easy, because even it catches my attention at times, and I'll be like, "Whew, okay, let's step back. Let's try to make sure we understand this whole thing." And getting a greater understanding, it takes time, but we believe that's the best approach to be able to fairly and objectively evaluate what happened.
Well, is there anything else you want to make sure our audience hears today?
I think that it's, law enforcement doesn't move at the speed of social media. We just never will. We try to keep up, but we can't. We have processes. And I guess I just, over the years, I asked that if whatever video, whatever story, whatever audio clip you heard or whatever, that everyone does their due diligence to get a greater understanding of what happened. Or if they can't, give your law enforcement agency the opportunity to look at it in its entirety. Much like, you think of the analogy of an NFL football game on any given Sunday, right? If a catch was in question or in play, and we're not sure whether it was a catch or a drop, we're going to stop. And we're going to sit there and we're going to allow the referees to go over to the sideline, look at the camera, call New York and say, what are the rules? What other angles do you see? All for catching a football. Very important in that moment. Our process is no different. If it catches your eye, fine. We too will have to give it that 360-degree look. What are the rules? And apply those same tests. While they won't certainly happen in 10 to 15 minutes like a football game, they will happen, but we will be dotting a lot of I's and crossing a lot of T's. And so patience isn't always easy, but we need to get after these things sooner than later. But to be thorough, that takes us some time.
Well, Lieutenant Ramos, I appreciate you so much for being with us here today, and having this conversation with me, and being able to share this with the public here in Green Bay. Our goal really is to kind of add some nuance and complexity to things. So I really appreciate you reminding us of that as well. That, like, a clip might sound bad, but there's a lot of process going on here, and that people are working to do their best with what we've got. So
And if
very
they're
much
bad,
appreciate
and
that.
if they're bad, we don't want them in uniform either, right? And if somebody's abusing their privilege and their authority, make no mistake, I don't want to work next to them either, right? But if they are human in that moment, then we can make an understanding. And even if mistakes happen or misconduct, let's find out how it happened. Was it a mistake of the heart or the mind, right? Where were the intentions? What were they trying to do? And bring an understanding to it, not an excuse. I'm not for that, but understanding of those situations, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. So thank you to all of you out there in the universe for joining us today in this conversation. And thank you especially to the Green Bay Police Department and to Training Lieutenant Chad Ramos for joining us, and giving us some additional context here. Again, we really encourage you to join our Facebook group called Stand Against Racism within the YWCA Greater Green Bay page for continued dialogue. We really want to hear from you. Is there anything you learned in this webinar? Do you have any more questions questions in this webinar that came out of this. Do you think that this is enough? Do you think that there needs to be more? Let us know in the comments in that Facebook group, and let's have a conversation about that. And again, thank you so very much to Humana for sponsoring this series this season. We really appreciate you so very much. So thank you all for joining us in our mission to eliminate racism and empower women, and have a really fantastic rest of your day.